In the same month that a London couple from the Democratic Republic of Congo were found guilty of murdering a teenage boy they accused of being a witch, a local pastor says cultural beliefs in witchcraft are leading to cases of abuse here in Nottingham. Now, you may remember hearing about Christy Bamu, the 15-year-old who was tortured and drowned in a bath by his sister and her partner. They were convinced he was possessed by Kindoki, or witchcraft, and his punishments in a so-called deliverance ceremony became more and more violent, ultimately leading to his death. Now, as shocking as it may sound, it's not a one-off, according to reports that children in Britain are being abused and murdered in increasing numbers because cultural beliefs in witchcraft are rife among some African communities. British Zimbabwean church leader Jamie Garande runs Milestone Covenant Ministries, a multicultural city centre-based church with a predominantly African congregation. Pastor Garande says cases of witchcraft and child exorcism aren't unheard of here in Nottingham.
Unfortunately, there's some churches, and I'm using that term very loosely when I say this, but the focus is very much, any problem that you have is caused by the devil, if you like, and if there's any challenges with you, our responsibility is to get rid of that witch in you or things like that. And the example that I can use is we've had instances where people say, your child's wetting the bed, it's a demon doing that, when actually no, she's 7 years old, and that's kind of how it they are at that stage.
So you have come across people who say, my 7-year-old child is wetting the bed, therefore they're a witch.
Well, you got to understand this. The people come from very different backgrounds, and what our church, and I think our church is just a microcosm of different churches across the city. But people have different cultural experiences and backgrounds, and there are certain parts of Africa, predominantly, because I can talk definitively about Africa because I am African. There's certain parts of Africa where, due to, I guess, education is a big challenge. The focus is on, you've got demonic possession, you are a witch, any problem that you have is caused by the occult. And that's, I guess, in many ways because the occult is a big thing in some of these countries. So it's a natural extension to think, every problem that you've got is caused by this. Witchcraft is in in pretty much every African country, as well as in the West. And we've spoken about that before. But I think in the West as well, you do have witchcraft, and it does rear its ugly head all over the place. But in the African context, the predominance of this, if you like, is there's a lot of countries in the west of Africa, and then in Central Africa, that tends to be the kind of the hotspots of this kind of activity.
And is that something that you've come up against with your congregation?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've had a few instances where we've had members who've come out of different places. Sometimes they've come into the city and come across the wrong kind of people who've, taken them into some of these places and sort of said, well, look, you're struggling, maybe your immigration status is not sorted out, or your finances are not working, and again, it's because of this particular activity. And then we've had to, if I'm honest, as like most pastors do, I guess, had to pick up the pieces, really counsel these people through what are very traumatic experiences, and help put them back on track.
And what sorts of experiences have you come up against that these people have had?
Well, again, people who've, for want of a better term, been abducted by some of these organizations, taken into places where they need to go through sessions for 3-4 weeks at a time to get rid of, demonic possession. They've been hauled away from their family, not been given access to anybody, and obviously a very traumatic time because the living conditions haven't been great. And in one instance, we had to have one of the families had to intervene, to actually get their family members out of that situation.
Is it still happening today?
I believe it is. I think it's one of those areas which is very much it happens, but I think it's not mainstream, and I think sometimes a lot of it happens, it's hidden. So I wouldn't be surprised to discover that there's actually more of it going on. It's on occasion you'll then have people who are pulled out of that, and then you get to find out from them. But again, a lot of people, even when they come out of that sort of setting, are not very keen to talk about it. So it's difficult sometimes to know exactly how much of it is going on. But I do know it's going on.
Why do you think the focus seems to be on children?
Well, my experiences, and I think this is very important. My experiences of witchcraft generally, when I talk about experiences, I'm talking about study, because I've never been a witch. But my study as a pastor of this kind of activity, and my study of the occult is it's a big requirement in that setting for children to be involved because of their innocence. There's a perceived benefit to getting children involved, even in terms of sacrificial killings. Children are regarded as innocent and pure, and that's why they're involved. So typically, even within the UK context, you have children disappearing all over, and that's symptomatic of a lot of activity that's going on in mainstream society.
Pastor Jamie Garande from Nottingham's Milestone Covenant Ministries there. Nottingham City Council's Children's Services were asked to come on the show this afternoon to talk about the work they're doing to tackle this issue, but declined, saying cases of child witchcraft and exorcism aren't on their radar and therefore not something they're willing to comment on. Now, despite explaining that according to the information you've just heard, those affected are often new to the UK and therefore vulnerable to language and cultural barriers, which may explain why cases aren't being reported, the City Council say the responsibility falls on members of the public to report child abuse and not on Nottingham City Council to examine possible cases. A stance Justin Bahunga from the charity Africans Unite Against Child Abuse says highlights the failure of policy to safeguard children. Justin, welcome to BBC Radio Nottingham.
Well, thank you very much.
Tell us what's wrong with the Council's approach.
I think it's a matter of reaching out, because in the first place, it's not to say it's for them to come when there's an issue. I think the Council's responsibility to reach out and see what problems are. Number two is to listen to the communities. We think that the communities are the best experts on all issues. And I'm very glad that the past has been so good in pointing out first place that it is a few people rotten apples in the churches. So that sometimes there's been centralization that actually it is a lot of churches, and I think I'm glad he made it out. And the secondly, I thank him because he came out, and that's what we need as an organization for the mainstream, well-abiding churches to come with us and work in a partnership to marginalize the few who are trying to spread the name of the church or the religious leaders. But as I said before, the council should have the responsibility to make sure that they listen to the concern of the community. And I think the pastor is in a good position to know what is happening in the community, especially that most of our communities, they might not go to social services, but the first place they go to are the churches or the mosques.
Tell us about the work you're doing with Africa.
Africans Unite Against Child Abuse was established in 2001, and indeed it was in a response to community concerns about abuse in the community, following the tragic cases of Victoria Klimbie in 2001. But you had another case in 2005 of a child B in Hackney, also picked from the street in Ronderbag. And we've had the case we talked about of Christy Bamu in 2010. Cases of extreme violence which has led to death. And so our work has been, first to work with the communities so that they understand the laws of this country, with the policymakers so that they take into consideration the concern of the community. But the faith leaders also, because as I said, most of our people go to churches so that they have a child protection policy in any place. But also practitioners, we do training, a national training program, so that they understand the cultural and religious values and the practice of the community, so that they can intervene and help better families when they are concerned of abuse linked to belief in spirit possession and witchcraft.
Do you think simply saying we'll wait until these cases come to us is doing enough?
It is not. Absolutely not. While they're waiting for another child to be killed to be intervene, I think that is something that actually anyone will say no. And especially when you see what has happened to the children. Victoria Klimbie died with more than 120 scars on her body. Christy died with more than 30 wounds on injuries on his body. And as you remember, it was told, one of the things we have done is to smash 4 bricks tiles on his head. And for us, one child suffering such atrocity is one child too many. You should not wait for that to happen in order to be able to act.